Ever wondered why the world's richest nations today weren't always the economic superpowers of the past? From ancient farms to digital economies, history is packed with massive economic shifts that changed the course of civilizations. Empires rose and fell, currencies changed hands, and industries that once ruled the world disappeared overnight. Today, we're diving deep into the epic story of global economic evolution, where power moved, why it moved, and what it means for our future. If you're curious about how agriculture turned into industry, how Europe took the lead, and why countries like China and India are rising again, you're in the right place. Hit that like button, subscribe, and let's journey through the past to understand the future of our economy. The pre-18th century global economy was the agrarian, relying on agriculture and land-based production. This period was marked by subsistence farming, limited technological advancement, and feudal systems. Understanding this economy's transformation into a modern industrial one is essential for comprehending global economic trajectory. Agriculture was the backbone of major civilizations like Mesopotamia, Egypt, Indus Valley, and China. Over 90% of the population engaged in farming for self-sustenance. Tools like wooden plows and sickles dominated, with modest improvements from inventions like the Chinese iron plow and Roman aqueducts. Land ownership defined wealth and power, with feudal systems in Europe and zamindari in India institutionalizing economic dependency. Land was the primary means of production, with serfs, slaves, and peasants tied to it, contributing to the wealth of manors or landlords. Trade existed through routes like the Silk Road and Indian Ocean, facilitating commerce of Chinese silk, Indian spices, and trans-Saharan gold. Barter was common, with coinage limited in rural areas. Taxation was often in kind, supporting monarchies and religious institutions. The agrarian economy was vulnerable to environmental factors like droughts and floods, leading to famines. Technological innovations were minimal, restricting surplus and specialization. Population growth was limited by high mortality rates due to disease, poor sanitation, and malnutrition. The agrarian economy shifted due to European exploration and colonization, expanding trade and creating early capitalist markets. Nations shifted focus from land-based wealth to trade-based accumulation of gold and silver. Scientific and agricultural revolutions boosted yield and freed labor for industrial sectors. Post-Black Death, Europe experienced economic restructuring with growing cities and empowered workers due to labor shortages. Institutional changes included the decline of feudalism and the emergence of nation-states and capitalist property laws, like the enclosure movement in England. Global GDP share in year 1 CE was dominated by agrarian economies like China, India, and the Roman Empire. By 1700, India, China, and Western Europe had significant shares. Pre-year 1700, over 90% of labor was agricultural, but by 1800, it was about 50% in England due to the Industrial Revolution. The collapse of the agrarian economy was gradual, driven by technological innovation, demographic changes, colonial expansion, and capital accumulation from global trade. The rise of industry, science, and market-driven incentives shifted labor, power, and resources toward urban industrial centers. Before the world ran on machines, it ran on muscle. For thousands of years, economies were rooted in the soil, dependent on weather, land, and manual labor. But then, something extraordinary happened. Between 1760 and 1840, a silent revolution transformed dusty villages into industrial giants. Factories roared. Steam powered the future. And human life changed forever. This is the story of the first industrial revolution, the moment the world shifted from agrarian tradition to mechanical innovation. In this video, we'll uncover the economic engines that fueled it, the inventions that defined it, and the global forces that reshaped the balance of power. Ready to learn how the modern economy was born? Hit that like button, subscribe, and let's step into the smoke and steam of the 18th century. First Industrial Revolution, 1760 to 1840. How industry replaced agriculture. The First Industrial Revolution, 1760 to 1840, marked a pivotal shift in economic history, transforming agrarian societies into industrial powerhouses. Originating in Great Britain, it brought profound technological, social, and economic changes, reshaping production, society, labor, and global economic dynamics. Before 1760, economies were mainly agricultural, with over 80 to 90% of Europe's population in farming. Productivity was low due to limited technology. The enclosure movement in Britain privatized lands, increasing efficiency but displacing workers, setting the stage for industrial transformation. The Industrial Revolution was driven by innovations like the spinning jenny, water frame, spinning mule, power loom, and steam engine. These inventions increased production efficiency, leading to a surge in cotton production and making Britain a leader in textile exports. Displaced rural populations moved to urban centers, doubling Britain's urban population between 1801 and 1851. The factory system replaced domestic systems, offering higher efficiency and profit margins. Innovation created new sectors, expanding demand for goods and fueling factory output. The British Empire exploited colonies for raw materials and markets for finished goods. Capital markets in London funded factory expansion, and infrastructure investments in canals, roads, and railway supported industrial growth. Coal and iron production increased significantly. The rise of industrial capitalists shifted wealth from the aristocracy to factory owners. Labor conditions were harsh, with long hours and low wages, leading to early labor unions. Income inequality widened initially, with real wages rising only after the 1820s. Western Europe began industrializing by the 1830s–1840s, while India and China were economically marginalized. The US Northeast started its industrial boom in the early 1800s. By 1850, Britain accounted for 20 to 25% of global industrial output, creating a bipolar world economy. The agrarian economy collapsed due to inefficiency, labor displacement, profit motives, and technological obsolescence. Farming methods stagnated while industrial tools evolved, leading to a shift in capital investment from agriculture to industry. The First Industrial Revolution was a total transformation of economic life, altering capital-labor relations, reshaping global trade, and paving the way for modern capitalism. It created wealth and innovation but also inequality and exploitation, influencing future economic debates and reforms. Have you ever imagined what your life would look like without electricity, trains, or even factory-made clothes? What do you think was the most game-changing invention of the First Industrial Revolution, the steam engine, the spinning jenny, or the power loom? If you're enjoying this time travel into economics and industry, don't forget to hit that like button, share this video and subscribe for more deep dives like this one. Hey everyone! Welcome back to the channel that shaped our world, economics and history. If you're passionate about understanding how global economy came to be, you're in the right place. In today's video, we dive into the fascinating era known as the Second Industrial Revolution. This was more than just machines, it was about electricity, steel, oil, and innovation that shifted global power from farms to factories, and from local trade to global empires. Before we jump in, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Hit that bell so you don't miss any deep dive content on history, economics, and global development. Let's get started. Between 1870 and 1914, the world witnessed a second wave of industrialization, this time driven not by coal and steam, but by electricity, steel, and oil. From the rise of New York to the chemical labs of Germany and the shipyards of Yokohama, economies expanded, transformed, and collided. The Second Industrial Revolution, where machines became faster, smarter, and far more global. In this episode, we'll unpack how economic power shifted from rural farms to urban factories and how new giants like the US, Germany, and Japan emerged to challenge Britain's dominance. While the first wave of industrial change brought factories and steam, it still left major gaps. Transportation was slow, communication clunky, and raw material use inefficient. By 1870, the world was ready for the next leap, and the race for industrial supremacy began. The tech that changed everything. Let's talk breakthroughs. The Bessemer steel process made construction scalable. Electricity changed how we lived and worked. The telephone and telegraph shrank distances. Between 1870 and 1914, U.S. steel output exploded from 68,000 tons to over 24 million tons. The rise of new giants, U.S., Germany, Japan. By 1880, the United States surpassed Britain in industrial output, becoming the global leader in steel, oil, and finance. Germany dominated chemicals and electrification, while Japan, fueled by expanding railroads over 7,000 kilometers in just 40 years. Corporations, capital, and labor. Mass production, joint stock companies, and early management science transformed how industries ran. Capital investments in U.S. manufacturing rose from $2.3 billion to $17 billion during this period. Global trade, empire, and people on the move. This wasn't just a national story. With power came conquest. Industrial empires raced to control markets and raw materials. Over 40 million Europeans migrated to the Americas in search of opportunity. The fall of the agrarian world. Why did agriculture fade? Simply put, it couldn't compete. By 1914, more than 60% of the U.S. workforce worked outside agriculture. Technology, capital, and market forces pulled labor into cities and left the rural economy behind. The interwar period and Great Depression, 1918 to 1945 collapse, and the road to modern economics. After the roaring engines of the Second Industrial Revolution fell silent in the trenches of World War I, the world faced its most uncertain decades. From 1918 to 1945, the global economy swung from post-war recovery to catastrophic collapse, and then back to recovery again, laying the foundation for today's economic institutions. Post-World War I economic landscape, 1918 to 1929.
The bubble bursts. The jobless men become the heroes of a...
World War I cost the global economy over $208 billion in 1918 dollars, and killed over 20 million people. European economies were devastated and deeply in debt. The US emerged as the world's creditor nation. From 1918 to 1929, the US economy grew rapidly, with GDP rising from $84 billion to $104 billion. But European inflation, especially Germany's hyperinflation of 1923, where the exchange rate reached 4.2 trillion marks per dollar, made global recovery unstable. The Roaring Twenties boom with a fragile foundation. The 1920s were a period of rapid innovation, mass production, and consumer credit in the US. Car ownership surged from 7.5 million to over 23 million by 1929. But underneath this boom were weak banks, speculative stock trading, and global debt entanglements. Globally, trade struggled. The Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act of 1930 was already being debated, signaling economic nationalism. The Great Depression, 1929 to 1939. It began with a crash, October 29, 1929, Black Tuesday. Lost 89% of its value by 1932. US unemployment hit 25%. In Germany, it reached over 30%, fueling extremism. Global trade fell by over 65% between 1929 and 1934. Economic ideologies shift, Keynes versus laissez-faire. Depression shattered classical economics. Governments had to act. Enter John Maynard Keynes, who argued that government spending could restart economies. The New Deal in the US spent $41.7 billion, about 40% of US GDP then, on public works, social security, and economic stimulation. Other countries turned to state control. Italy, Germany, and the USSR pushed authoritarian economic planning. Road to World War II, economic desperation and recovery. Desperation creates dictatorships. Hitler's rise in Germany was fueled by economic collapse and humiliation from the Treaty of Versailles. Military Keynesianism, spending on arms, temporarily revived Germany's economy. In the US, wartime production by 1943 eliminated unemployment. From 1940 to 1945, US GDP doubled from $101 billion to $223 billion, led by war mobilization. Why the Second Industrial Revolution couldn't prevent collapse? Massive innovations in the Second Industrial Revolution, markets lacked safety nets. There were no global regulators, central banks were weak, and gold standard rigidity made shocks worse. Innovation stabilization proved dangerous, and led to the birth of modern monetary and fiscal policy. Lessons from the interwar collapse. 1. The interwar era reminds us, technology alone can't prevent collapse, economic systems must be resilient. 2. The Great Depression revealed deep vulnerabilities in unregulated capitalism. It highlighted the dangers of debt-driven growth without oversight, and the fragility of international cooperation in the absence of shared rules. 3. Economists and policymakers learned that economic shocks require systemic responses. This period birthed key ideas such as automatic stabilizers, deposit insurance, and central bank intervention. IMF and World Bank, formed in 1944, aimed to prevent another global collapse. They represented a new approach of multilateralism, planned reconstruction, and exchange rate stabilization. In our next episode, we'll explore how the post-WWII order rebuilt the global economy.